and welcome to the DM's Book Club, a weekly book club podcast where we talk about some Dungeons & Dragons, most of the time, not today, and discuss how we might use it in our role-playing campaigns. This week, I have an extra special guest host. We've got the wonderful Nathan from the Reanimators Podcast. Hello, Nathan. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing great.
Good. We've been sort of circling each other a little bit, and then we're just suddenly going on each other's shows quite a lot now, which I love, because you have a love of improv as well, which I'm like, hooray, another person in the sphere that understands it the same as I do.
The nerd Venn diagrams overlap.
Yeah, we're sort of it's now a circle. That's what it is, I think. So, Nathan, I'd love to know, to get the audience to know who you are. How did you get into tabletop role-playing games?
Well, I got into tabletop role-playing games mostly through actual plays. Roughly, a little bit before 2020, was watching a lot of Critical Role. And I have a job that gives me a lot of time to listen to things.
Great.
During that time, I started listening to the Into the Darkness, which is a Call of Cthulhu role-playing club. And ended up actually joining them for a bunch of things. And that really led into a lot of horror games, horror gaming, etc., etc. And yeah, really just for some reason in 2020 had a lot of time to devote to playing games.
Yeah. Oh, amazing. So have you always been a big horror nerd yourself, or is it just like that just suddenly grabbed you as like an actual player as you were listening to stuff?
It just kind of grabbed me. Like, I was always into science fiction, that sort of thing. But once it became I can play in this, and then start watching horror, reading horror, doing all of that sort of thing to use in something else, that's really took it off.
Amazing. And my next question then is, obviously we initially started talking because of the game Community Radio that I sort of had a quick read through on Too Long Didn't Read. So you had played it before. So have you always been an improviser? Like, I think that's the key thing. It's always like you never see them in the wild, and then you're like, wait a minute, that sounds like improviser talk you're talking about.
So that again goes back to my copious amounts of free listening time. I am a huge fan of Comedy Bang Bang and all of the offshoots for that, like Neighborhood Listen right now is a big favorite of just improv people in that scene. And then it really overlapped with the gaming of like, oh, that's all this is. You're just making things up. You're finding out how to play with other people, how to edit scenes. And you don't think of it that way because you're just playing a game. But it's really kind of the same toolbox.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like, because I got into role-playing games before I started doing improv myself, and now those are the two big aspects in my life. I find it really interesting when I go to like an improv class, and obviously, you always get talking about like what are you interested in, and I'll talk about role-playing games, and there'll be lots of people who are like, oh, I've always thought that was interesting, but it seems too hard, and I'm just like, okay, that's weird because like it's not. And then you go to like role players and you'll be talking about like your improv class, and they'll be like, oh, that seems really too difficult. And but it's not. And it's so interesting because for me, role playing games is just improv, but you've just got all the prompts and rules to help you sort of push that narrative forward. And I always find it really interesting how the others, because they're clearly, like you said, like the two sections of the Venn diagram, we see each other and go, yes, I see that, but I find that too scary, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, too mathy. I think that's a lot of complaints I'd always seen is like, oh, you could play Dungeons and Dragons, but isn't it just a bunch of +1s and math, and you end up just kind of comparing the numbers until the monster's done, and it's like, well, kind of sometimes,
yeah,
but also you get to see the character too.
And I always think like Dungeons and Dragons is not the best one to start off with, but obviously lots of people do know about it because, as you mentioned, Critical Role, such a big thing. Now it's celebrating its 10-year anniversary and stuff.
Oh, don't do that.
I know, sorry. I have to mention it as a D&D podcast. But also like we've had like Stranger Things, we've had the films, so it's really in the zeitgeist. And so it's that sort of thing where now, and also now the 50th year as well, so people are aware of it, but yeah, they still think of it as majoritarily it is roll a dice, add a number, and you hit and kill the creature. Very Baldur's Gate, which everyone was like, oh, Baldur's Gate is great, and I'm like, it is, but it's not a role-playing game. It's a video game, As
soon as everybody gets that like fireball in the cultural zeitgeist, I think that kind of dominates the conversation, and then it gets away from the, well, you could do anything. You don't have to be in a dungeon fighting a dragon. You could go to space and die horribly from aliens, or you could, start up a nice little garden center and just play out with that. There's so much flexibility to it that I think the mammoth being D&D kind of overshadows everything else.
Yeah, like there's a game that came out recently from Evil Hat called Stewpot, which I don't know if you've seen at all. Yeah,
and I have a copy.
yeah. I was like, I'm going to say it. Yes, of course you got it. Yep. And I read that recently, and I didn't know what it was, because it feels very different to other Evil Hat games, which are usually, like epic fantasy, or they are grim, dark cities. And it's just like, oh, you're a retired adventurer now, and you play these like little mini game chapters and scene prompts until eventually you acclimatize to a normal life. And I was like, God, that's so brutal, and like oh my God, what a traumatic thing in a sense. And I was like, of course I want to play that game, of course I want to try that out. And so, but then just to go back, because obviously you said like Call of Cthulhu kind of feels like your main sort of vibe. Call of Cthulhu, well, I would say feels like it's very mathy as well. Certainly that character sheet has a lot to it, right? So
the initial form fillable sheets that calculate the halves and the fifths makes it a lot more approachable. But I agree, if you bring somebody new in and they see 30 some odd skills, and there's electrical and healing
mechanical
and
repair,
mechanical repair
versus exactly
library use, what's useful becomes difficult. So I agree, there is a big gap there. So that's why it's nice to have games like Cthulhu Dark, or just some of the lighter ones coming out, that it's like, okay, you get the genre, you get what we're going for, this kind of cosmic horror, but it's less numbers to just initially look at.
Yeah, and the same thing with like, I know I've talked to you so much about Blaze in the Dark as well, where it is do the big swings, and then don't worry, I will, as the facilitator, I will make sure we get there. It's whatever you want to do. And it's I'm a big fan of games that empower players to be like, well, I see the tropes, I see, like you said, see the genre, see whatever. Right. I want to play this character. I'm like, cool, you do not need to know anything about the character sheet, because I will help you get there. And through me describing and explaining the rules together, you can then go, okay, now I can do this and make it cooler as well. So the rules are supposed to support you rather than inhibit you as you've got behind your little sheet. And I agree, like when I saw the Call of Cthulhu initially, I was just there going like, oh, okay, make a survival check. You're like, where is survival? Like, it's alphabetical, be like, oh Lord. And it feels a bit overwhelming, but I'm very glad for accessibility now to have those also calculate sheets,
Yes. And playing with people that have more experience running games like that too is, when you start out, sometimes you run across people that if they've read the scenario, it has to go a certain way. And if a player changes anything or tries something else, that's very confusing and overwhelming. And there's a lot of butting heads there. So I was lucky to start out with people that had played Call of Cthulhu for years on end, so there's not much you can do to surprise them that they won't go, okay, sure, let's pivot, try a different skill, go a different path, see, the mystery may be solved a different way, or it may not be solved at all, but that's all fine. It's still fun.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of that in the sense of there is no mistakes. And if there was a really big, like, what are you doing? It's maybe, it's more of the player has misunderstood what the setting is. Because as soon as you set the setting and the tropes, you vaguely know, okay, certain things are within this setting that are appropriate, but maybe unpredictable. Whereas, like, if you said, like, okay, you're in the 1920s, but then you pull out a laser sword, you're like, okay, well, that is a mistake,
Yeah.
Speaking of, there are no mistakes. What have I brought you on to talk to me about today, Nathan? What's our topic of choice?
Our topic of choice is Improv for Gamers, 2nd edition by Karen Twelves.
So another Evil Hat production. This has been on my reading list for a little while now. I actually remember vaguely skimming through it when I was like trying to do some workshops and stuff. And again, it's one of those ones where I kind of forgot that it was part of the Evil Hat thing, because obviously Karen Twelves is an editor and all that, so she does a lot of stuff for Evil Hat. And from what I understand, kind of just pitched this on a whim because she does a lot of teaching and is a English as a second language teacher. And people at Evil Hat were like, go for it. That sounds great. And I'm like, Evil Hat sounds like a great company to work for, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I like that they put something like this out for role players. I think we'll get a little bit into how much of the role playing is in the book later, but yeah, it's a neat product for people that are just getting to, I think, improv for the first time, learning terms, some of the basic activities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said was really interesting about like learning to edit and stuff like that, because that is sometimes really difficult, not only as an improv person, because obviously when you're doing like a big long format show that you're all responsible for it, but then as a GM, learning when to edit yourself and be like, okay, we need to move the scene away from, get the scene back from those players, take the spotlight and then give it to somebody else as a director. I think so. So the book itself, it's split up obviously into many chapters. At the beginning, it sort of talk about what the book is for, how you would use it. And with the second edition, it talks a bit about how you modify these exercises as well, which I thought was interesting. Like at the beginning, Karen does her little forward in the sense of like, as soon as this went to print for the first time, I realized I need to update it for various reasons, which is always good. I think that's really good. And then we have sort of 8 big sections of like different kinds of exercise to play with your table, as well as like a big group of people, going all the way from like quick warm-up exercises all the way to the end, which is like scene work, which even I was like, whoa, this is quite a big extravagant thing, because this is essentially, from what I understand, like a one-day workshop of just doing all of this, like a very intense
oh my
thing.
Goodness.
Yeah, exactly.
That's maybe a bit much.
I mean, like, again, if you're, improv, as we know, is that sort of like, if you're 51% like there, that will get you across. But even I was like, for sort of the early ones of warm-up exercises, like sound ball and throwing stuff, I was like, okay, yes, I get that. But then like full on like background scenes and a montage at the end, I was like, blooming hell. Like even I find montages like scary at the best of times with brand new people. Because again, this would be taught at conventions, this workshop. So you're with a group of brand new people who you've never played with before, and you don't know their, lines and veils or boundaries or anything like that. So it's, that sort of trust needs to be built very, very quickly. Yeah. So, do you have any initial thoughts about the structure, or like any thoughts that stood out to you as you were reading this book?
Yeah, not an initial thought, but once I got to the end, I thought it was kind of interesting that it was laid out with the kind of warmers, and characters, relationships, all the way up to timing and scene work. If you're coming at this from someone new to improv, totally makes sense. These are the basic building blocks, like yes and is probably the first thing they teach you in class, more or less. Maybe after the warm-up. But as gamers, we're probably used to coming at this from the opposite direction. So you're already playing games where you have scenes, but you may not have the next step of timing, or you may not. I play mostly online games almost exclusively. So space objects is less of something I get to make use of. And there's some notes about making this for online improv. It does cut out a fair number of some of these activities, I think, but there's still some usefulness there.
Yeah, and I'd say as well, the accessibility stuff, it does make it, like it talks about, like, make sure you describe for visually impaired folk. There was obviously quite a number of these exercises require eye contact. And of course, what I loved about it did talk about online improv in a sense of like, hey, there's a neat trick where you put like a little thing over your camera and you look at that. And I was like, I did do that early on. And now I've trained myself to like constantly look at the camera. Because it feels like more natural now. But it's interesting because obviously, again, someone who's done a lot of improv and like in person and done some teaching, neurodivergent folk sometimes really struggle with eye contact as well. And I think it's that sort of thing where I think, again, I can see this becoming a 3rd or 4th edition book trying to be about more accessible for everyone, which is absolutely A-okay. But I did enjoy with this particular edition is that Karen clearly asked or commissioned a number of essays from a load of different people. I included my friend apparently is in this, Mary C. Parker, who I've played several times. I was like, oh, she's in this book as well.
Oh, cool.
Talking about like how do we play other characters sensitively and all that sort of thing. So I thought that was nice to dot that throughout. But again, it's that sort of thing where I don't know whether who's it for. Like, are we following it in order? Like, are we? the GM that's creating these things just before we go to a session, or is it for the player who's trying to get better at these things and thinking like, I want to play a character that's not necessarily from my culture, all that sort of thing. So I liked it, but I was like, oh, what is this structure about? What's the audience,
Right. It's interesting that you said it was like 1 day activity potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And especially for online games, I'm trying to think of when we would ever even be able to have that day. Like, how would we parse apart this book into maybe using them for warm-ups before sessions, cool downs afterwards? You introduce us to Stars and Wishes, so we've been using that as a cool down for us, but I could see maybe doing like the Hey Fred Schneider, where you're using that B-52s, I think.
Yes, it
voice.
Is. Yeah. Yeah, hey Fred Schneider, what are you doing? And then you go, and you have to respond with like just something really silly, but in that sort of like tone, like, I'm digging a hole for the body I killed. You're like, okay, and carry on, that sort of sense. I did think to myself, like, if I was a teacher and maybe doing my own sort of improv things, there's another book which I thought about, which was like, I want to say, it's not called School Meal, that's not what I mean, but basically it would have like similar sort of things where it would split up exercises in terms of like appetizers, main course, and dessert, and then you could then be like, okay, so I've got a group of like 10 people, they're probably going to be early teens to maybe 15, and we're going to be in a room. Okay, so we need at least 3 warm-up, 3 this, and be able to plan a lesson around that. And I thought that would have been a nice one to have, perhaps, but maybe break it down from like, okay, we've got 5 people, it's going to be online, but it's Call of Cthulhu, it's a horror game. So maybe we need to touch on like points of view or editing, dramatic pauses, all that sort of thing.
Right.
That's the only thing I was thinking of, because I like a lot of these exercises I've done myself and I found them fun, but as we said, some of them are quite physical. Like the one I saw, and I was like, I remember that one. So one of the one was called Throwing Swords, where you're all in a circle. Okay. And you want to say, I had a sword. I go like, and I go, Nathan, and I throw it to you. You catch it. Yeah. And then the 2 people beside you, they will cut you down, and you're all screaming at the same time. But it's like a physical sort of action where you're moving about. It's very difficult on Zoom because you're having to follow the host's order and all that sort of thing. But it's quite fun visually. It's quite fun to see. Yeah. But that's a very physical one that gets you into your body, so to speak. And so. But at the same time, I don't know if I would do that before a session. Right. Before we're going into like a role playing game. Okay, guys, everyone stand up. All right. Yeah.
Everybody's belly buttons in the camera. Yeah. Crumbs everywhere.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and it might not match the tone of what you're going for either. That's. You mentioned Call of Cthulhu, perfect example of me being cut down with swords is probably appropriate to how most of them end, but may not be kind of the, happy-go-lucky attitude that you're looking for in your rainy Innsmouth setting.
It reminded me of another game. It's not in here, but it was a fun one. It's a similar sort of thing where it's called Die Not Today, and again, you do it in a big circle, and the idea is like, we're all imagine it's Marvel's Endgame. So we're all there, whatever heroes, and you point to someone, and like so I say, I point to you, and go Nathan, and then I bring out like a huge weapon, or like it could be like a bow, or it could be a sword, or magical powers. I do my big sort of final attack, and I go die, and I throw whatever it is at you, and then you react by surviving somehow, whether it's you catch it and eat it, or you do a cool move, and then you go. Not today, and everyone goes yes, like that, and then you can carry on until that is all done. And I like it because it's so silly, because then you have people's imaginations working about what kind of weapon. I've had people give me poison chalices and going like cheers, die, and that was great, and it just fires up. And it could easily be simple as just like somebody just doing a big mega punch or something like that, but again, it's that physicality getting into your body and then firing off the creativity, which I always think is useful. Not just in improv, because obviously you're creating scenes out of nothing, but like if it was a game which is a bit more silly, perhaps, maybe a bit more cartoonish, then and requires that player forward thing, I'd absolutely use that,
Yeah. Do you do any of the warm-up sessions when you're playing with new groups or new players or anything to kind of get their vibe?
I haven't done any recently, but I remember one time we did like an in-person recording, and none of us had ever played together before, but because I think it was something like they wanted to have characters with certain voices. So, like, have you got a character voice? And so, yeah, I know. I was like, I'm playing myself. But they were like, okay, my name is Henry, he, him, and I'm going to be playing old Cod Chipper. And it's just like saying things to get yourself into character, which I thought was really interesting because I hadn't considered that before, especially because, you know, we've all gone that way going like, okay, I'm going to do a voice. And you go, oh, I shouldn't have done that voice. And now I've got to either commit to it or it was a mistake, you know. But yeah, I've tried to do, I've done like the game we spoke about, the community radio. And I've made that incredibly simple of just using like the base game for it or picking everything out and then very much being the facilitator going like through the first round. Okay, you do a scene, you're this, and then slowly easing off.
Okay.
But I've never done like a let's do warm ups because I always think like I don't know, it's that inner theatre kid in me who absolutely hates warming up.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, usually with online games, I'm thinking about the clubs I play with and the people we play with. Usually it's a case of before we get to a editing game, there's usually like we'll just play an outside game with them, you know, we'll try out, see what the vibe is, see if they match, because that's a big part for tables is
100%.
just getting somebody that matches the vibe, because everybody can be super cool and nice and they could not work together at all, and that's just life.
That's just the way it is. Sometimes you don't know until it happens and you go, okay, now we know. Yeah, no, it's true. Like, there's definitely people I've played games with for content without realizing it before, and I've gone, oh, never again. In the nicest way possible, because again, like you said, the play style is different. You know, and anything that has, if any issues have arise, we've got safety tools to help with that. But it is interesting.
Yes.
You go, oh, that person is someone that maybe takes the spotlight a bit too much, and then I'm just there going like, well, I will take the spotlight and then take it back, and so it's tricky because again it's very hard, especially if you're doing it online as well, because you don't know, you can't read the non-verbal cues of body and stuff like that, and certainly tone, especially if you've got maybe a delay in the internet as well.
Yeah, and that's something that is good about the book is that when it's teaching these things, it's putting there's no leader teacher necessarily, right? There might be somebody that kind of gives the idea of how it works, but at least the impression I got was then they would also join in the games as well.
Right.
So these are things that it's not just like the director learning or the director coming and being like, okay, now listen, I want you to stop that scene and move on because you've been talking for 3 hours about how to scale the castle walls and the doors right next to you. You start getting players that when they do these things, they can start looking at timing and just Spotlight's a good example where they go, I think I've been talking for 5 minutes. Let's check in on what somebody else is doing or have somebody else come help me.
It's being aware of it as well. Cause like in improv, like, you know, if a scene's gone on too long because you're like, gosh, I wish someone had edited the scene. And it's like, you should have edited the scene 30 seconds ago. And I liked what you said because, there's no necessarily like you are the leader. It's player A, player B, etc. And actually, that's a good point because I feel like, because initially what Karen said in her forward was that this was like an instruction manual for an improv teacher. Like, here are my notes, here's how I would run these exercises. But actually, I think quite a number of these exercises, certainly later on, when we talk about editing or scene work or that sort of thing, moving that around, like, it feels like, hey, maybe we're doing more GM stuff or encouraging players to become GMs, which we've already got a very small funnel of like people going like, oh, I like actual plays. Oh, I like playing. Oh, I'm now the GM. It's like, very, at the end, you are then the forever GM,
No, that's our target audience. I get it. It's a niche of a niche. But I think being able to inspect that kind of element of the hobby is just a lot of fun, is look at, okay, well, how are you creative? Why is someone doing the thing they're doing, that cool choice they made? Why is it like, why did it catch you? Because some people can't help but overanalyze.
Yes, absolutely.
Not me, certainly, but some people.
No, but I think it's interesting. As someone who now has to get lots of clips for like RPGs, I'm the one that sort of picks them out, and I have to make a note of it and go, oh, that was a fun bit. But then you've got to get clips that are under a minute. And you think to yourself, but this whole scene was pretty good. It's really difficult. And obviously there are ways where you can edit it down. But when I'm getting it, I'm like, well, this was a fun part, but you need this context and you need this. And then eventually I just go, it has to be the minute of the punchline and then work back from there. And then maybe then you have to add context in terms of the text around it, heist gone wrong, that sort of thing. But it's fascinating that, again, a lot of our narrative styles, I think I am certainly getting more I got to get my stuff out ASAP. And that's not necessarily this will be a clippable moment. Not everything I say is a clippable moment, but it is that sort of thing where you're that it's snappy and I've communicated it in a very well way rather than us dancing around. The planning of it is we've got what it is. We need to move on and get back into media res when we're doing these scenes, because why are we watching this scene? What's different about this scene that we could see in every scene,
Right. Why are your characters here and talking as opposed, why would we focus on them picking what's for dinner at the tavern unless there's a reason? Usually isn't. Usually people just want to role play getting mead, and
people do love shopping scenes, don't they? And you just there going you've got all the stuff. You're capable adventurers. We don't, unless it's a magic item's gone missing, everyone likes shopping. I'm like, look, you tell me what you want, it happens. And I'm like, oh, but I want it back and forth. It's no, you don't. You want to go out shopping. Go shop yourself,
That's why I'm not a good Pathfinder player, is I don't look through all the items and figure out what I need. I just go, I'll ask later if I need the thing. I'm sure I picked up a healing kit, right? Yeah. My character would remember.
You should have all the basic equipment, and then anything more is a flashback or is a cool look mood or something like that, I was going to say one of my favorite ones that came out of this in terms of exercise, it's in Yes and, so that's sort of second big chapter, and it's called Sense Story. And I've used this one before, where you have someone that is you pick someone to go first as the storyteller, and then you pick 3 other people, and they have assigned a sense, so whether it's sight, smell, maybe touch or something like that. And then you get the person to talk about doing just a story that they make up, and they talk for a minute, and then you get each of the other sense storytellers to then retell that story in about a minute, as much as they can, but using their point of view of the sense. And then at the end, it comes back to the original storyteller, who then has to incorporate any details that they liked into the original story. And I just thought that's such a cool aspect. Yeah. Because we love the 5 senses, as describing things, certainly for horror, right? But then to be these people picked up on these things. I like that. That's cool. And you just build the story together.
Yeah, I like that method for adding flavor. We just played The Zone somewhat recently, and that is one of the main keys is, spend a moment, say what's weird about the scene. And I think that the Gauntlets games have that, the idea of the unseen, and that is very specifically a scene that does not exist. Your characters don't know anything about it. It's happening concurrently. It may not relate at all to the scene you're doing, but it's there for the vibes, and you'll go around to each person at the table and do that sort of scene setting thing with a pointed question. And by the end of it, it's usually very creepy and maybe is thematically resonant with the scene that the players are about to go into. And often players will try and bring that in later because they bring what they like, or if they go, I hated it, they
leave it there. They
never see it again. So yeah, I kind of see that parallel there.
Yeah, I love the unseen. It's one of my favorite things I got to experience when we did a 2-shot of The Between. And incidentally, nice. with the new edition of The Between as well. So not only do they have the unseen where you go out into the London setting, as you said, doing this sort of separate story, whilst your players are also doing nefarious things at night. But equally, so in that setting, you have something called Hargrave House, which is your sort of main base of operations. You could go out into that and do the unseen, or you could describe a room in Hargrave House and unlock that room and get extra moves and stuff. And it's the same thing where your characters aren't in it at all, like that, but you describe something that happened in the room many years ago, or maybe the room itself. And I just think that, again, it's so cool. So not only is it widening the setting perhaps, but actually going into your space and making it deeper, instead of going wide, you're going deep and creating a little bit of history detail that your hunters in The Between have no idea about or don't care for it because they've got their own foibles and stuff like that. And it just really engages people in the setting. I love the Gauntlet games. I think they're so interesting and they're so collaborative. Like Brentlewood Bay is, where you play old lady solving crime and you theorize who did the murder. And I think that's such a brave thing for the GMs just to let go and have the players have a go. And the players are like, hand you over this thing. You're like, well, we'll roll to find out because it sounds cool,
Yeah, there's a reason they can get by with their one-page scenarios because they don't have to have the answer and the trail of clues. That's for the players to come up with. I do want to point out, I wish they had an exercise, and these are very like general exercises in the book, so they don't even really go necessarily towards a Dungeons and Dragons, which probably would have been the easy approach, is kind of flavor everything that way, which Stewpot does to bring it to that. But it would have been nice to have an exercise of building a home base like that because, oh boy, I don't quote me. Vaesen Vossen does the same thing with their Castle Gillencrates. It is this place that the players build up over time. It's shared, and it becomes the kind of extra character of the campaign in a really neat way. So that would have been fun to see a collaborative space building.
100%, yeah. Scene painting, I always think, is underrated in improv because I think it's not necessarily used as much as it used to be. So in terms of like, if I gave the suggestion of like, a birthday party, someone could come in and physically into the space of like, you see bunting and it says happy birthday, but half of it's pulled down, all that sort of thing, and everyone builds a scene and then you play in the scene. We don't do that much anymore because I think people just want to get to it's about the characters and the relationships, which I totally get. But I love what you said about like the setting, the vibes. They're also a character, and I that's my big thing about like, I want to make sure that we've created this character and now we give it life by us being on it. It feels very Thomas Hardy in a sense, because he's always like, the Heath, it's big, it's dark, and the people are living on it, but the Heath is still here, it's always here. And you're like, okay, Thomas, thank you. Was there any particular exercise that stood out to you as something that maybe if you were going to do a couple of exercises, if you were thinking about doing it with your group of players, any that stood out to you as one that you would do online, perhaps?
Yeah, I really enjoyed under the scene work. There is the 3-line scenes, and the name of it is exactly what it is you go back and forth between two people, and it is 3 lines of a scene. One person says one line, other person says the other, then back to the first. So you should, in theory, end up with these very succinct, kind of like those two sentence horror stories sort of things you'll see online.
Nice.
So yeah, I've seen another podcast, Greenbox Gaming. They do Delta Green, but before any of their kind of talkback sessions, they do a collaborative story building that's just more or less a sentence, and then it passes to the next person who adds a sentence over to the next person. And that's kind of that same vibe of like, you get the vibes, yet you're really pushing for it. So you got to kind of know what you're looking for later in the session, but it doesn't take you out of that, which I like.
Yeah, I like that. It feels very like sort of 10 Candles-esque as well, where it's like, we know these things to be true. And that was interesting because I only played that once, and again, that was online. As wild as it could be. And I find it difficult not to add lots of details, but you have to say it as true statement, and it moves story on, but it has to be like almost like a single thought or a single sort of thing. And I was like, and again, obviously you build the horror for that because obviously 10 Candles is horror. And I was like, this is great. More of this sort of stuff. I like it because again, it teaches you to be efficient with your words and create something evocative that people could jump off of, but you're not suddenly going like, and this, and this, and this, and then you're like, again, it gets all muddied down as a player. So short and sweet. World building is like beautiful.
Very useful for the GM, especially for those of us who like to talk and talk and talk. It's nice to be able to say, okay, I need to introduce them to this room in 3 lines. Creaky chandelier, carpet is worn, and the table's on its side. There you go. There's Perfect. 3 things done. Ooh, that's all you get.
And interestingly, I like it because you said like those are 3 sort of things that are obvious. Like because it talks about somewhere here. It's like when we're creating characters, like there's like a character building one, a similar sort of thing where you're like, my name is this, and everyone goes, hooray, this, and he goes, she likes this, hooray. But it says like only have one weird thing.
Right.
And I was like, yes, that makes total sense. Because, all characters, ultimately, they have something, that drive, or they've got a special power or an ability, or there's something about them that makes them like, that's why we want to play them, that's why we want to engage with them. Or a lack of something. Maybe they don't want to be the chosen one, all that sort of thing. So it makes them interesting. But if you have too many weird things,
right,
you lose that thing. It's like, oh, they're just the comedy, they become 2D as well. So I like that, because you could have easily gone like, creepy chandelier, a worn carpet, big horse in the middle of the room, it's like, well, I wonder what the weird thing is,
Yeah, well, that should have come first too, probably.
Yeah, I think I said it before, it's the Douglas Adams of the things where you describe the room and go, oh, by the way, here's the thing you need. That should have been the beginning,
The dead body? Yeah,
yes, exactly.
That's probably the noticeable thing, yeah.
One of my ones I would love to use a bit more, and I've done it before. There's one called Hot Seat, which is in the character section. And that is just simply like you come up with a character, or you're given like a prompt or something like that, and you form a character, and then you're asked questions about that character. And when I've done this in person, what was really cool is that the teacher had brought like fictional characters from like illustrations or video games or all that sort of thing, and we all picked one so we could see visually what this person was like, and then we would go and like we had to get up, walk as that character, sit down, and then take questions. And I obviously didn't know who it was, but it was like an imperial person from Warhammer. And so I did and that was great because then I could walk and then sit down, and then like it was great because then I was like, why am I being interviewed? I clearly should not be interviewed by whoever these chuckleheads are. But it was fun because then I was like, I didn't have the choice of who I was, and I was like, I would not necessarily have picked that character to be in the hot seat, but it was so much fun. So I think that's the thing I'd like to do, is like be able to somehow give people an image that they can see, that only they could see if they were online, or maybe just like send them a link to like I said, a fictional character of some sort. It's easier than celebrities or real people, because otherwise then people try accents, and we don't need that. But then being able to embody that, because I think that's just a lot more fun when you're given like a fictional character. Go, oh yeah, that's, and even if you don't know who they are, if you're if you don't know what Commander Shepard from Mass Effect sounds like, you could be like, cool, but you know what they kind of look like, and you can like physically have an idea of like, okay, they probably have this point of view because of how they look,
Yeah, I think the randomized characters, if you're doing a one shot, is really fun for that. As you were talking about that made me think of the Troika game. Have you ever? Yeah,
it's bonkers. I love it. It's so silly.
And that's just it. It's a completely bonkers sort of table-based thing where you're going to roll, and there's all kinds of classes you could get. You could be a rhino man, you could be a person with swords, you could be a false dwarf, and they all kind of have that same trippy art that's like, you get a vibe off of it. And I like just having players that want to roll and see what they get and then work with that in the game. And it lets you play someone that you're not usually. Like I might become a brave hero as opposed to a coward. A coward.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you going to say coward? No, Nathan,
yeah, it's a coward.
No.
I would say when you play Call of Cthulhu, it helps to have a coward character so that once the rest of the team dies, they can come in and gather other people and say, all right, guys, the last team, this was their mistake.
This happened again. Yes, absolutely. That's so funny. Like I had the same thing about like characters as well, in that sort of sense of like, I try not to play too many, I say kooky characters. I always try and go last because I could see where then in the party we can balance and stuff, but often happens, certainly in certain, say a game like a Fiasco, is that suddenly I'm like, no one's the leader, no one's this, I'll do it. But then I always find, again, not that I see myself as a leader, I'm just like, oh sure, I'll do it. But then I get some really delicious choices in the sense of like, well, my high status duty is this, but obviously I know that's going to screw over X, Y, and Z, and I'm just like going like, yeah, but I get to play with those moral choices. That's one of my big like foundry stuff, is dealing with moral choices, obviously in a safe environment, and make sure everyone's okay with it. It's like a cool dramatic thing, whether it's Call of Cthulhu or Fiasco, and you get to really embody that. And it gives you a chance to try these things out, which you wouldn't normally get to do.
and see those kind of breaking points for a character that you thought, oh, they're going to be a coward this whole time. And then you realize, like, oh no, in this scene, like the way it's going, I think this is the moment they'll stand up and do something. And there's a rush for it. That's part of the fun. I agree, though. The leadership one is tough for me to not do. Be like, all right, you guys are dithering about too much. I'm grabbing the wheel. We're going this way.
Everyone's playing silly little guys, and that's fine. But we need a silly little guy taking the lead and moving this boat along. You know,
there is a time schedule, and this is a 2-hour session. Let's get moving.
Oh yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned the zone as well, and obviously that has sort of like not randomly assigned characters, but obviously it has certain tropes as well. And I went for our playthrough that I went for the soldier, which was really interesting because I normally don't tend to play characters who I say that D&D obviously is like, haha, barbarian, let's go, you know. It feels more silly, but then like, it was really interesting because I hadn't really considered like how crucial that soldier who has to deal with violence and also push people through it. We had a really good time with it, but it's one of those things like, damn, this is brutal. I'm glad that Nathan knows me and I'm not just come into his game and gone like, right, let's go, you know, and then like gently like sort of dismissive of the other characters, but it just fit in well with the setting and stuff. And obviously we had safety tools as well, but that was a character that I was like, I haven't played that kind of character before, and I'd like to try it and see where we go with it and what kind of stories we can create with it and what choices we can make with it.
I mean, that's one of the best reasons to do improv, I think. You know, even if you're just doing the things from the book, you're going to learn skills you didn't think you didn't have, and learn things like, oh, I need to be more succinct. Like when I started gaming, that was a big one for me, is like, okay, I'm an engineer a lot of my time. There's no call for succinctness. I should probably work on that. That would probably be good for me just as a person. And things like timing and status was an interesting one, really getting that thought of like, okay, when in my life, how do I talk to people? How do people interact? It's fun. If you like analyzing everything, it's a lot of fun.
It's true because again, both you and I have sort of like various sort of teaching background, both in TTRPGs but also in other work stuff. It's like, how do I get across this information that isn't patronizing, but it's, you know, but it can be quite difficult for people who have different learning skills and stuff like that, and also encouraging them when they fail as well. Like there's another exercise on status called encouragement ball, which I've played loads of, where you throw an invisible ball and your aim is to not catch it, and everyone still cheers because you still made, you know, you made a mistake, you made an attempt. But it's interesting because a lot of these exercises talk about, like, you know, an explanation of why we're doing it like this, or a sort of a expansion of it. And one of the things it says in that is that whatever you do, you know, like don't think about how you're going to catch it or fail to catch it, and certainly don't do one where you catch it in your crotch, because like we get it hilarious, but like, you know, you clearly planned that, you know, just miss it completely, and that just gets you into the mood of like just doing something. And certainly, like I said before about people worrying about mechanics and getting stuff wrong, it doesn't matter as long as we go, that's a really cool idea you've had, sod the rules, let's make this work. You know, certainly in D&D now, you're like, I don't care about this, what do you want to do? Great, let's do it. Let's make you feel like the cool hero at the end of the day, you know?
Yeah. And that's one of the things I like about horror gaming in general, is like Call of Cthulhu, the failure is inherent in the system. Delta Green's the same way, is your characters don't get better ever. Like their skills might go up a point or two, but their sanity is plummeting the whole time. And by the end of it, they're going to be just this wreck crying in a room somewhere all by themselves. So you don't have this constant need necessarily to build yourself up as the hero, because you know it's going to end terribly, and that failure can be fun. It can be a lot of fun. About the most fun you can have.
Well, it's true. Like a lot of times when we do horror games, and it's certainly said it in the zone, is that we know only one character is going to get to the end, and the other two characters, or other 3 or 4 characters who die along the way, they get to shape the ending. And it's not like a, oh well, yeah. And also there was a mechanic in the zone where you could sacrifice the other, you know, yourself for the other person and stuff like that, which again, it's an interesting mechanic, but ultimately you know that whatever happens, it's going to be a meaningful way you go out. I just thought that was really cool. going back briefly to world building, what I do love about improv, and I think it takes a little while for people to get into their heads about it, is that you don't have to just play humans. You could play animals or objects and stuff like that. And of course, lots of TTRPGs, you could play a whole range of different folks. But one of the, again, going back to status, there was one game called Animal Secrets, whereby you would like say, in a circle, you'd be like, you say, oh yeah, zebra, and everyone would be like, ooh, and you go secret, and it could be anything. It'd be like, I hate stripes, and they go secrets, and you do like little jazz fingers. And I just thought that was really great that you suddenly create a very unusual animal or whatever, and like it could be something like a statement of fact or something that that particular animal does not like. I just thought that was a great one. I've never heard of that one before, but the idea of like, and also as long as it doesn't punch down or anything like that, but it could be like, I think squirrels are overrated. Secrets. I just thought that was just a cool way of world building.
Kind of ties in. They suggest Microscope as that same sort of game like that, where you have that building off of each other, and you all kind of have this fun thing that you've come to. It's interesting. You can't see because we're doing this, but you're doing like the finger wiggle thing. Yes. That's so that is a thing I'm seeing a lot in improv, right? I don't come at it from that angle. So improv has a lot, it seems, of traditions and like little movements to their hobby. What do you think is the reason for that? Why is it not just, let's all sit around quietly, the zebra will say a secret, and we'll go, thank you for your secret, Mr. Zebra. Next,
yes. Very good.
Mr. Armadillo, how about you? Yes.
Although that sounds really fun as well. I don't understand. Like, I think it's because, again, it's that group mind thing, because it goes back to that encouragement ball. Like, we all want to be on the same page. Like, yes, it's like yes and ultimately, right? So, like another one of the examples is like, you state what, you go to a location, everyone goes yes, and then you go and do whatever it is at that location and stuff like that. So as soon as you're on the same page, and so if you like do that ritualistic sort of like secrets and with the finger wiggles, everyone goes, oh yes, that sounds good. I've done it before where we've done something like genre cauldron, whereby like you maybe I've talked to you about it before, but you have like a cauldron, a fictional cauldron in front of you. You take space work. Yes, absolutely. You take the lid off, and then you'd be like, high fantasy is our genre, and then people will go, oh, and then physically like grab something, like a mind grabbing something, and you would put it into the pot, but it'd be like a wizard's tower, and everyone goes, and you put stuff into the pot, and it could be a location, it could be like a fireball, or like guards, get them, anything like that to get you on the same page about the trope is. And then once it's done, the teacher will be like, all right, drink up, and then you get your goblet and you all drink at the same time. But again, it's maybe not for everyone, but I like the idea. And there's also a song to it as well. We go genre cauldron, genre cauldron, genre cauldron, and that ends the thing.
Now I'm aware some people may say this sounds cultish.
I don't know.
You're not necessarily wrong. But it's a friendly cult for the most part.
It's a fairly friendly cult. It is definitely, people get very passionate about it. I mean, when people say improv changed my life, role-playing games changed my life, it's a similar sort of vibe, isn't it? But ultimately, I think anything like that which has something sort of physical movement, it's just a way to like encourage everyone to be on the same page and also maybe end the scene. I don't know if you've played or read through Die, the RPG at all.
Oh, yes. Yep.
And they've got that ritual at the beginning where they give out the dice to indicate we're in the magic circle, and then at the end they take them back and you thank the players for playing. And I always think anything like that, and solo games do it as well with like music and all that sort of thing. I think it's just really nice to be like, and this is your space to be someone else. And then once that's over, then you go, okay, now let's decompress, because we talked about the stars and wishes and stuff. So that's what I think is the case, just to get everyone in a sense of like, we're all going to be silly and you don't have to be funny, witty or clever, like that's what I would suggest. But I'm not an expert, so I have a lot to say on the subject.
Neither am I.
Is there anything you think would improve this book at all? I know we talked a few bits and pieces, but is there anything as you were sort of looking through? I appreciate you probably have not memorized every single one of these amazing exercises and stuff, but is there anything that you're like, I wish there was more of this, or this could have done with something?
I think I would have liked to see more discussion of the editing necessarily. So there's some discussion of the timing chapter. I think the split screen activity in particular is very useful. Kind of the the old idea and a lot of D&D stuff is you never split the party. Not just because, combat-wise it becomes tricky. It's also more difficult for the game master to go, okay, we're going to run with you in this room for a while, then you guys for a while, back and forth. And that's what split screen is really trying to do, is say, okay, watch this scene for a bit, then stop, move over, have them do a different scene, stop, back to the first, kind of ping-ponging. And that's such an important skill to have. And it's very difficult to do, kind of to your point where you go, I should have edited that 30 seconds ago. Being able to recognize 30 seconds ahead that you're going to be thinking that in 30, that's the key.
Yeah, I think split screen is really interesting in person, but because I think it also relies on not only you, the GM, like knowing when to move things, but also for the other players to not use meta knowledge. Because obviously, if they're, again, hopefully they're all paying attention to what's happening in that scene. It's not like 20 minutes later go, oh, I guess I'm back now. But like, you'd be like, oh, they've done this part of the heist, but we're not there, and we're like 20 minutes earlier. But we know what they're doing and stuff like that. And again, that's where I think sometimes we have those certain game frames works like Blades in the Dark, where you have the flashbacks, you have the ability to do that. But yeah, I think I agree. I think I'd love to see more like maybe these exercises, certainly with the timing and maybe scene work, which had maybe specific examples for RPGs. Now, it might be very difficult because obviously you said like, we don't want to necessarily have like, oh, it's all high fantasy D&D or that sort of thing. But it did feel like, again, they're very neutral, which is great. But like, if we did a game and we're like, okay, we're doing a split scene, we would do coffee shop where it's just like, oh, it's all like a party, this, that, and we go, great. Right. And now we go into film noir where we don't have that, So again, it'd be nice to have, I think, specific genre play examples, perhaps, or at least like they have like recommended like characters, locations, relationships at the end, which I'm always a big fan of rolling that sort of stuff. But I would like to be like, fantasy, sci-fi,
that would be great.
I think that because that will. Because a lot of times when you talk to improvisers, if you say, "Oh, we're going to do high fantasy," they go, "Oh yeah, dragons!" You're like, "Yeah, dragons!" I mean, like, who doesn't have dragons are my Roman empire? That's the. But like, I'll go to a class and they'll be like, "Captain, it seems like we've got aliens coming on stream." Like, oh shit, we're in a starship! Amazing! And I'm like, "Yeah, what's stopping you?" It's just, I think, just more examples of like the different genres. I think would be really helpful here.
Yeah, that would have been just a little bit more zest to it as you went through, that keeps it from being mostly improv instead of gaming.
Yeah, because you want people to pick it up and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. I can use it for this game, rather than like, I don't see when lead with your body comes into it. And you're like, well, it does come into it. That's fair. We're coming towards the end of time, Nathan. I guess from obviously your reading of the book and obviously your experience and stuff like that, is there a big tip you give to someone who is interested in role-playing games but doesn't have necessarily an improv background or anything like that? Is there anything that you'd give to them as a big piece of advice, you think, if they're coming to maybe any one of the Reanimators games?
Well, we're always happy to have new people if they wanted to join and try out a game. Sure. And it really... I think to me, the biggest thing is just start and find something that excites you and start doing it. So if you're looking at D&D and you're going like, hey, it's great, not for me. Like, I don't really truck with dragons. It's not my thing. That's great. There are other games out there that people want to play all the time. You might be like, you might want to play something cozy like a wander home and just be animals that are wandering around and doing nice things. That's, you know what, fine. If that interests you the most, awesome. Yeah. Take some time, do it. And kind of the big thing from improv, you're not doing it wrong.
Yes.
You really, amazingly, you can't mess up. People might not always play the same way, but you're not messing up. Yeah.
And even if they think you're messing up, like, you're not. Like, again, it's some people obviously have certain fixations, so it's about doing things right. But as long as you're all on the same page at the beginning and that set that expectation, certainly as a GM should be doing that, then yeah, I 100% agree. Just give it a go, as they say.
Yeah. Especially if you're a GM's doing like a session 0 or something to set the tone, which hopefully people do, or at least do a little bit before their game, of giving you a chance to listen and go, okay, this is for me or not for me.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, well, Nathan, thank you so much for coming to chat to me on a time of recording, a Friday night where you could have been out being cool and playing other RPGs and stuff, but you've come in here to talk to me about improv games. I very much appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Please let us know, where can we find your work? Like, what is the Reanimators podcast, in case people are like, what is this that you've been talking about? And where can we find all the good stuff?
All right. The main job I do is for RPG Reanimators, and you can find them at rpgreanimators.com. We're on YouTube. We're on podcasty places everywhere. Technically, we're on other places, but we're so bad at updating. Don't worry about it. Just go to rpgreanimators.com. And we're a discussion-based podcast that talks primarily about horror games, often from a GM lens of how do you take a scenario, how do you update it, quote unquote fix it. And we've had a lot of really great authors on to talk to them about. We've had guests like Fiona on to talk about other topics around RPGing. So we have all of that, and we have a lot of It's Alive actual plays, which is kind of the companion to it, where we just play whatever game I can convince our wonderful players to play. We just recently played The Zone. I just got through a recording of Morbo's Catastrophic Sanctuary, which is a JoJo's Bizarre Adventure spin-off sort of game. And I think we have some incredibly talented players that I'm lucky to game with. So come see it for them.
Amazing. Oh, thank you so much. And yeah, honestly, I highly recommend going and check out the RPG Reanimators podcast. If you want to check out unusual RPG games that have a horror twist, absolutely go to their first port of call, I'd say. And thank you so much, Nathan. I very much appreciate you coming to chat to me about improv. Hooray! It's all good.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.